Peace. So we're in a country where lynchings still exist. And the purpose of lynchings in the old days was to take a person who supposedly committed a crime or who was accused of committing a crime, and without due process, they would be lynched in public as a public spectacle. A lot of times those lynchings were actually cover-ups of what those white folks, quote unquote, so-called white people had already done. You know what I'm saying? And they covered it up, or they misinterpreted someone's rumor or words, or whatever the fact of the matter is that lynching has been on and went on in this country and continues to still happen. And not only does lynching depict lack of due process and lack of justice and lack of a court process, it also depicts mutilation, torture, and other things, because before a person usually is lynched, those brothers and sisters in the South, and today still being lynched, before they were lynched, they were tortured. A lot of times mutilation, you know what I mean? The cutting off of the genitalia and other body parts and so on and so forth. The cutting off of the ears and things. You know, they took these things home and used them and kept them as prize pieces. They took some of these pictures and these lynchings and turned them into postcards. See, this is a part of the legacy of America. This isn't critical race theory. This is history. So in that regard, let us examine lynching, and let us examine why lynching is still a permanent process and still a tool that is a terroristic tool that is used to control and oppress consistently, quote unquote, so-called black and brown people. And to this day, it is still being used. And they're using it in such a way where we, who getting the message, we know and understand what it is. We know and understand that a man cannot hang himself with his hands tied behind his back and his pants over his knees. You understand what I'm saying? We understand that that's a lynching, that man was hung up and the body was set that way. See, lynching plays a big part in this country, the message that it sends and the images that we continuously see through social media. See, social media aids in the passing of the trauma. The images that we see consistently being played to us over and over and over and over again, and these things begin to work on your psychology. You know what I'm saying? It begins to make you become a scary, weak, and docile individual, because the only thing that is left, if you tell the truth, is death, or you can be picked apart just because of what you look like. You understand what I'm saying? So here we have in Mississippi just recently, a man was lynched, right? And decapitated, and they said that he got drunk and hung himself and his dog bit his head off or something of that nature. Some bogus reality. But when we look at it, we know that lynching is one of the tools that is still being used in numerous ways. I mean, they kill us consistently and they call it suicide, right? Just like the young woman in Georgia who spent the night at those females' house. All of those quote-unquote white women that she spent the night with, and they found her dead the next day. See, that's a lynching. Even though she wasn't hung, that is still a lynching. Her body was tortured and mutilated. You see? So what we have to begin to realize and recognize is that we don't want to see these things. See, it's so many lynchings that has occurred, they're not even made public to you for the news and so on and so forth. But they shouldn't be made public in that way, where we have to continuously see these images. Post-traumatic stress syndrome. We live in environments that are PTSD oriented. You understand what I'm saying? Whenever you can go into an environment and you watch a child jump rope and some gunshots go off and they continue to jump rope, that means they have become desensitized to that particular environment. So that means that the gunshots have become normality to them, and they became used to it, but that's an abnormality. See, we've become used to the abnormal when the normal has become the abnormal, and when the abnormal has become the normal. This is where we're at right now. So I want you to understand that this whole thing about lynching that we continuously see, brothers getting lynched at the hands of terrorists, you know what I mean, homegrown, foreign, and domestic terrorists. Think about how they used to do it. They used to hang the bodies over bridges. You know what I'm saying? Over waterways. That's all science behind those things. They were executing certain types of degrees. See, what they did was in those lynching days, and today still, in a lot of those lynching times in the 19th, 18th, and 19th century, they were actually executing the penalties of masonry. You understand what I'm saying? The torture was masonry penalties. The cutting off of the tongue, you know what I'm saying? The slitting of the abdomen, the tearing out of the heart and so on and so forth, the removing of genitalia and things of this nature, and making them eat it, stuffing it in there. This is all also, some of this is also the penalty degrees of Freemasonry that were experimented with our people. They used those penalties and experimented with those penalties on our people. So I'm here to say this. Kamala Harris and the old dude, I forgot his name, they tried to get an anti-lynching bill passed, but the bill failed. The bill will never pass because lynching is still a technique and tool that they use. You got to understand that there's a whole demographic of people in this society that will lynch, that are actually paid to go out and to do these things and to remove body parts as well, to take the organs and things of that nature and send them other places. But places like Mississippi, places like Georgia, Florida, but specifically Mississippi and Louisiana, got a strong history of lynchings. And Mississippi has had more lynchings, and they just had a recent lynching. You know what I'm saying? In this one that just occurred that I just spoke about. But there's been lynchings all through Mississippi, and they've all been called suicide in the 20th century, back in the 90s, the raping of the girls and the lynching and the hangings and all that. They have all been called suicides. And if they have been hung or lynched, there has been nobody that has been made guilty of those particular murders and assassinations. See, a lot of these times that these lynching things go on too, they're also ritualistic. You have to look at how they operate. A lot of these lynchings are ritualistic. So I'm here to tell you, you must protect yourself at all costs. You must protect your children, your wife, your son, your daughter, your grandkids at all costs. You must teach your children how to fight. You must teach them how to use weaponry. You must teach them the science of survival. You must be able to teach them how to identify white supremacy or the idea of white supremacy. You must teach them how to you must teach them how to identify hate. How to identify hate, and also how to battle and fight against hate, and to instill in them self-confidence and things of that nature. Because see, what happens is with all of these images, what they do is they work on your psychology and they make you terrified. They scare you. You see what I mean? And guess what? I'm not from that era of being scared. I don't come from that era. I'm from a different time period where we fought. You understand what I'm saying? And we didn't cry about, the injustices and so on and so forth, because we know they exist. But this generation cries about racism. They treat me wrong, and because somebody told you and gave you a fantasy world. See, there's two different Americas. Regardless of what people want to tell you, there's two different Americas. And people of Asiatic descent, black, colored, Negro, whatever you want to call it, African, American, two continents, black, colored, Negro, Latino, whatever you want to call it. We live in two different societies. The Europeans live in a different society from us. And they say it's equal, but they can't even see it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times their racism is so inbred that when they do things, it's just so naturally inbred in them that guess what? They don't even recognize it as a problem. And then they have to find out and learn that it's a problem because that behavior and attitude is just so common amongst that particular paradigm. Then they have to say, I'm sorry. Because they don't recognize or understand because they're so far removed from our reality. See, it's two different worlds. And lynching plays a part in that world to execute and to assassinate people at your own condition and your own will and not have to be chastised for it is a power move. To constantly lynch men and to take the women and to rape them and to put them aside is a power move. You understand what I'm saying? These are moves that was made 300 years ago, and they're affecting us now in this day and time. Look at the relationship between quote unquote the so-called black man and black woman. Look at the relationship between so-called black people and everybody else. Period. We have no friends. You understand what I'm saying? So the best thing that we can do is begin to lynch white supremacy and to lynch it with truth and to fight it in every aspect that we see it. To move out in groups, to don't go alone, don't hang out and drink with these people. You understand what I'm saying? Don't feel like you have like it's okay, because guess what may happen? You may end up dead or lynched, just like the little Asiatic girl who hung out with her European friends in school. They drove out to somewhere to party and they beat her damn near to death because they just didn't like her. Stabbed her up and everything but she went and hung out with them. You have to be very, very careful. Remember James Byrd? He went and hung out with them too, and they dragged him behind a truck and then lynched them as well. You see what I mean? So we can talk about these things all day, but I want you to understand what lynching is. It's a tool to execute terrorism. It's a tool to keep terrorism in its pure form, and they're continuously doing it today, and they're telling you that it's suicide. Wake up.